As I alluded to last time, this will be the last substantive message I will preach on Colossians. There are another dozen verses that kind of wrap up the letter with some hellos, how are yous? We're sending greetings to you, and these are greetings from us. And tonight, if you'll come back at 5, we will look through those. I don't see a full sermon worth of content, and so we'll just leave that as a short Sunday night look at it. So one substantive verse, Colossians 4, verse 6. Let your speech be always with grace, seasoned with salt, that ye may know how ye ought to answer every man. One more time. Let your speech be always with grace, seasoned with salt, that ye may know how ye ought to answer every man. All right, so speech. Is this limited to when you're selected to talk at graduation and you got to get up there and give a speech? No. Say, obviously not. These are your words. How many words do we use every day? Some of us, if we can help it, we'll use 4 or 5, right? Others of us use a myriad of them, right? How many of those should be full of grace? All of them. That's the standard. Seasoned with salt. Always. The Greek behind that is literally every when. That's just different enough to make you think about it. When should you have it? Every when. I don't know what we think about everywhere, but every when. At all times. Let your speech be with grace. Grace. All right? Well, what's grace? Greek word is charis. The root word from that is what we get as a verb full of cheer. Cheer. Grace, that which affords joy, pleasure, delight, sweetness. That has a lot to do with our speech, right? Charm, loveliness. Grace of our speech. Now, this is not talking about painting rosy pictures that aren't true. This isn't talking about flattery. This isn't talking about being deceptive in any way. But grace should be woven through our words and our sentences, right? As tightly as you've got weaves in your fabric. It should be built into it. It should be a part of it. Right? What is the most important example of grace that exists? The grace that was shown to you and to every other child of God by Jesus Christ's sacrifice for you. It is in Christ that you are created a new creature, created unto good works, ordained that you should walk in them. Included in the good works is the words that come out of your mouth. And how we treat people. Because we really have 2 options whenever we open up our mouth. We can be building up somebody, or we can be tearing them down. It generally falls into one of those 2 buckets. There may be some exceptions, but let's just say that's our general rule. Are we building up, or are we tearing down? All right? Grace should build. All right? It should glorify God. Do my words glorify God? That's probably a better way to think about it. All right. It gives us a word picture there. Let your speech be always with grace, seasoned with salt. All right. Y'all ever had a meal that was just real bland? All right. You're like, they didn't really put much effort into the taste. My dad has a word for it when you're just having rations and it's just to have calories. It's food. I think it's spelled F-U-D. Food. It's food. But normally one of the main features about food is what? The taste. Sometimes we use salt to help bring out that taste, right? But the idea is whoever's preparing it has thought about it in advance, considered how they want it to taste, and then they prepare it accordingly. I'm sure Brother Dean has a very specific recipe for them donuts. He doesn't wing it and try different things every different day of the week. You may play with it till you got it just right, but then you want to keep using the the one that's right, because you know the taste comes out good. All right? So the idea of seasoning here is literally to prepare. All right? To take that which you're working on and prepare it here with a spice to season it. Well, salt, right? Salt makes things taste good. All right? Job talks about, an egg without salt. Right? So the word picture here is that just as our words should be seasoned with grace, right? It should be things that build up and are good to hear in the ears of those that are around us. All right? Salt is good. But if salt has lost its savor, what good is it then for? Right? Cast out and trodden under men, right? The essential property that makes salt useful is that it tastes like salt. Okay? And who did Jesus identify as being the salt? His people, right? You born again children of God, your essential flavor, right, is going to be the graciousness that has created you, that is going to be manifested in all your deeds, but particularly this morning in your words. All right? Why is this important? It tells you. That ye may know how you ought to answer every man. All right? Whether you are responding to somebody inside the church or outside, if your words are seasoned with grace, then you know how you ought to respond. Will you always do that? As the Cajun chef said, I guarantee it, you won't. But this is the standard. This is how you should know how you ought to. And so the challenge for you then is today is, will I? Will I strive for this? Will I try to think ahead and season my words in a way that glorifies the Lord and builds up those that are around me, that help cause joy and pleasure and delight and sweetness and charm and loveliness to those around me? Or am I going to be wrapped up in myself and tear down and be snarky or sarcastic or cutting or biting or mean or whatever? All the things that we know that we ought not to do, and we just excuse ourselves and say, well, that's just me. No, Bubba, that's your old you. You've been created to something new, something better. All right? Gracious speech. So that's our topic this morning. I want to go to Ephesians chapter 4 and in verse 29. Right? Ephesians is very, very similar letter to Colossians. There's a lot of overlap. We've looked at a lot of different companion verses as we've gone through Colossians. Ephesians 4:29. Context of this whole chapter is talking about putting off the old man, putting on the new, not walking how you used to walk, but being renewed in the spirit of your mind and doing some things, right? Things that glorify God. 29 says, let no corrupt communication proceed out of your mouth, but that which is good to the use of edifying, that it may minister grace unto the hearers. All right, let no corrupt communication. That word corrupt literally means rotten. Something got a bunny in the yard last week. I don't know what it is, but I know that something drugged the rest of it up behind the bushes. And it had an odor. And it took me a while to find the source of that odor and get it out of there. But what was the problem with it? It was rotten. And it stunk, right? Rotten things have a particular odor. How about we put that in the taste category? You going to put that bunny in your stew pot? No, right? So you want to contrast with things that are seasoned with salt. Are your words rotten, like a dead stinky bunny? Right? And that word communication It just means your words, logos. It's the same word earlier used as speech. Your words. Let no corrupt communication, let no corrupt, rotten words proceed out of your mouth, but that which is good, pleasant, agreeable, joyful, upright, honorable, all synonyms. Something that is intrinsically good. Who is good? God is good. Guess what? If the topic of your words are closer to Him, you got something good to talk about. The farther you get to the world, more opportunities to have corruption. Let no corrupt communication proceed out of your mouth, but that which is good to the use or employment, doing something with it, right? We're not just yammering to be yammering. There should be a purpose for our words. What's the purpose? For the employment of edification. It's a great preacher word. No one uses that in day-to-day life, right? You may have heard the term edifice, right? Top of a building. Edification, I always use a simple definition of building up. But let's go a little farther. Let's give this definition. I found this one. Act of one promoting. The act of one promoting growth in Christian wisdom, piety, happiness, and godly conduct in others. So where I am promoting the growth in others in wisdom, piety, godly conduct, happiness, the joy of the Lord. If I'm living the joy of the Lord, I want to share that. Right? And when I'm sharing things about the Lord, what should be happening to my brothers and sisters around me? They should be being built up. Now, you have no control on how they respond. But it's a pretty good pattern that if I were to come in, walk into a room with my arms crossed, my brow furrowed, and I proceeded to complain to you for 45 minutes about everything that's messed up in the world and why I'm upset, and politics and economy and my health and finances, blah, blah, blah. You listen to that for an hour, how are you going to feel? You going to feel built up, encouraged, closer to the Lord? No. Right? So this has the idea of asking ourselves, do I need to be saying this? Right? It's that concept of a filter, right? Gives you a little pause button between thinking it before it comes out your mouth. Let it filter there a minute. One, ask yourselves two questions. One, is it true? If I don't know for a fact it isn't true, don't go any farther. Just stop. But two, is it useful to those around me? Is it going to build them up? Is it going to promote good things? Or am I going to be casting stumbling blocks? By that I mean leading others down a path that I don't need to be going, of discouragement and focusing on the wrong things. Okay? That which is good to the use of edifying, that it may minister what? Grace. Let your words be full of grace, seasoned with salt. That which is good to the use of edifying, it builds us up, that it may minister grace. That word minister just means give, bestow. Have you ever thought about the fact that you can give grace through your words? Well, I'm not God. No, you're not. But you do have the ability to give and show grace, to be an encourager, to build people up through your words. Grace unto the hearers. All right? So when you enter a room, are you creating peace? Are you creating calmness, joy? Or do we choose to stir up strife, conflict, emotional charges, gossip. These are things we have to grapple with. Why? Because we're human, and we still got that old nature. And we like to have it our way, and when we see somebody doing something that's not something we do, we like pointing it out. It makes us feel a little bit better. There's a difference between going to somebody and trying to encourage them so they don't take a bad path and talking about somebody. Right? What is the purpose for opening my mouth? Is it to build up somebody and minister grace? Or is it some other carnal reason? Right? We're walking in wisdom towards those that were out. That was the previous verse in Colossians. You remember that? Go read it. Go back to our letter. There's a link in this. Chapter 4, verse 5. Walk in wisdom toward them that are without, redeeming the time. Let your speech be always with grace, seasoned with salt, that ye may know how you ought to answer every man. There is a link between wisdom and how you speak. See? Let's go to Proverbs chapter 16. Proverbs chapter 16. And we'll start in 21. Proverbs 21, verse 16. The wise in heart shall be called prudent. All right, so one who's wise in heart, they are perceptive. They have that heavenly wisdom. All right, called prudent. One who understands, who has discerning. And the sweetness of the lips increaseth learning. You ever tried to instruct somebody while yelling at them? How well does that lesson get in? You ever had a teacher, think back first, second grade, and you had a teacher just embarrass the hound out of you? Did you hear anything they were saying when the blood's pounding in your ears and your face is bright red? No, you just wanted to hide, right? So one who is wise, who is discerning and has perception, understands that the choice of words that we use impact whether the things we want to teach are heard and learned and retained. Right? I could say things that could make you very upset and defensive and angry. I could be saying things that are true, but the words that I choose to use and the tone that I choose to use could have a very poor impact versus using sweet words, right? Words that are full of grace, that are tempered and toned with a purpose, with discernment, with planning ahead, thinking about how can I be useful and build up the person I'm talking to. Okay? Y'all see me raise my eyebrows a lot, right? Those are my gentles. Maybe that's not the best way we could express that. And I don't want to get on to anybody, but I do want, by my eyebrow, you to think, is this best? Right? And if we can start having those conversations before we say stuff, we'll have more success as we minister to one another. Right? And I'm not thinking about anybody in particular because this is something we all struggle with. Right? If you don't think you got room to improve in this, let me tell you, you got room to improve in this. All right, this is something we can work on until the day we die. So wherever we're at. All right? But there's a link between wisdom and recognizing that our words impact those around us. The sweetness of the lips increaseth learning. Understanding is a wellspring of life unto him that hath it. But the instructions of fools is just folly. The heart of the wise teacheth his mouth. But whose mouth is being taught there? The wise man's, right? So the fools said there's no God. right? So the wise man here should be you and I, right? And the heart should teach his mouth, right? So there's some internal dialogue and reflection and thinking of it, is this best? And then having a change, right? Governing how it comes out of our mouth. And addeth learning to his lips. All right, so he's teaching his mouth, he's adding learning to his lips, so the lessons there can be received by his face. And guess what? The learning within his lips improves in others too. Right? The ability to teach. You will be a better teacher if we learn how to communicate with grace. Right? Verse 24 says, pleasant words are as honeycomb, sweet to the soul and health to the bones. Pleasant words are as a honeycomb, sweet to the soul and health to the bones. Is honeycomb sweet? Yeah. You ever screw your face up like a lemon when you had honey? No. Right? Now you can have too much honey and get a bellyache. I know the metaphor only goes so far, but the idea is that our words should be like that. We shouldn't have that, sour lemon impact on other people, where everything we say just makes somebody uncomfortable and draw up and angry. Right? But as much as we're able to learn through self-control and temperance and prayer, we should use words that are pleasant and good. Now, this, again, does not mean that we are going to flatter. Flattering is just deceiving people. It's not telling them the truth. We're to speak the truth, but we're to speak it in love. Right? But not everything that we think needs to be spoken. Right? If the use is not going to be for the edification and building up, we can keep many things to ourselves. Right? I know I mentioned that one, that studying to be quiet. I think about that a lot. I need to have discernment as a father and as a husband and as a pastor of when do I speak up, and if I speak up, what do I need to say and how do I need to say it, and when do I just remain silent? Okay. Pleasant words are as honeycomb, sweet to the soul and health to the bones. So your soul there, that's your life, right? The hidden man. And your bones, that's like your natural body, right? You can physically make somebody feel better in mind and body by how you speak. That's pretty cool. The opposite's true. You can make someone physically feel awful. Or we have physical symptoms and just feel bad and discouraged in our soul and spirit by having a bad conversation with somebody. Jump down to verse 27, just for the sake of time. We'll look at the contrast. The ungodly man diggeth up evil, and his lips are as a burning fire. A froward man, or perverse man, soweth strife, and a whisperer separateth chief friends. What's the action that this unsavory character is doing in all these? He's using his mouth. Digging up evil. Right? Politicians call it oppo research, right? You're trying to figure out what somebody else has done wrong. And you're going to go seek it out. That's one context. Another could just be looking for trouble, looking for harm. And his lips are as a burning fire. James talks about that pretty extensively. We'll go to that in just a minute. How about a froward man soweth strife? Well, what's sowing mean? I mean, he's got needle and thread, boys? No, it's like when Brother Parrish goes out with his tractor, he's got the planter on it. He's casting out seeds, and you want something to grow. Well, what's going to grow from what they sow? Strife, conflict, division. Do we ever get into attitudes and times where our mouths get us? Well, I don't want to put that. Our mouths don't get us. We get ourselves in trouble using our mouths by saying things that cause strife and division and hardship. We plant those seeds, and then that's what grows. This is the opposite of what's described, I believe it's in James as well, about those who sow fruits of righteousness. They sow them in peace. And the people that are sowing them are the peacemakers. Right? I think one whose words are full of grace is more likely to be seeking peace and seeking to sow seeds of fruits of righteousness in others. Yeah. Versus sowing strife and conflict. A whisperer separateth chief friends. Whisperer. That means someone who just talks really softly? No, it's talking about someone who gossips. You know, the one who loves to play the middleman. Something's going on. Well, let me go. Did you know what so-and-so said about you? And then they go to the other person. Well, you'll never know what so-and-so said about you. And if you can have best friends and you got somebody playing ping pong like that, it drives a wedge in them. That's what the point of the, a whisperer can separate chief friends. That's one of the things the Lord hates. Those who sow strife and cause division among brethren. Some of this can be intentional, thought out harm. Some of it can just be careless. Right? Well, I wasn't really thinking. Is that an excuse? No. Right? It's not. We don't have we have the ability, but we don't have the right to say, well, I just wasn't thinking about how that would, treat somebody. We need to. It may not always be right, but we do need to be considering others, right? How did Christ show love? By putting others ahead of himself, right? All right. I mentioned James. Let's go look at James. James chapter 3. Talked about the tongue being there like a little fire. Hebrews and the book of James. James 3. We'll start in verse 2 to get a running start. For in many things we offend, all of us. If any man offend not in word, the same is a perfect man, and able also to bridle the whole body. Behold, we put bits in horses' mouths, that they may obey us, and we turn about their whole body. Behold also the ships, which though they be so great, and are driven of fierce winds, yet they are turned about with a very small helm, whithersoever the governor listeth. Even so the tongue is a little member, and boasteth great things. Behold, how great a matter a little fire kindleth. The tongue is a fire. The tongue is a fire, a world of iniquity. So is the tongue among our members, that defileth the whole body, and setteth on fire the course of nature, and it is set on fire of hell. For every kind of beast, and of birds, and of serpents, and of things in the sea is tamed, and hath been tamed by mankind. But the tongue can no man tame. It is an unruly evil, full of poison. Therewith bless we God, even the Father. Therewith curse we men, which are made after the similitude of God. Out of the same mouth proceed blessings and cursings. My brethren, these things ought not so to be. All right, there's a lot going on in those passages, so let's just start back at 2 and kind of work through it a little bit. For in many things we offend all right? In many ways we fall short. We have a lot of different areas where we sin against God. All right? It says there's someone who doesn't sin with their mouth. They say, well, that's somebody who's got their whole body in self-control. That person, other than Jesus, doesn't exist. All right, and he gives an illustration of like, look at the horses. When you ride a horse, how do you tell him where to go? Well, he's got a bit in his mouth, pull the reins, and that's where the whole body directs. So is a horse bigger than you? Yeah. And yet by controlling its mouth, you turn the whole thing. How about a big old ship? Sailors have to get out and push to change directions? No, what do? Well, the sails give it the force forward, but you have the big steering wheel, which is attached to a little flap at the back of the boat. You turn it one way, it goes one way. You turn it the other, it goes the other. That's it. Called a rudder. All right, you got a little wheel, a little rudder, and this big old ship can be turned wherever the governor, the boss of the ship, the captain, tells it to go. He says, look at those two illustrations, those word pictures. He says it's the same thing for your mouth. All right? Your mouth, your tongue, a little part of you. And yet it can set a course and a direction for what you do. Behold, how great a matter a little fire kindleth. And y'all play with matches when you were kids? Good. I did. And I got in trouble. Right? Because what can happen with just a little bit of fire? A big fire. Yeah. And your parents get really upset because they look at that little fire and they see the big fire coming down the road. Whereas you as a little kid, you say, look, it's a bitty little fire. It's kind of like a birthday candle. Those don't hurt anybody, right? Okay. A little fire can cause a lot of trouble. Can your mouth cause a lot of trouble? Yeah, absolutely. There are wounds that cannot be healed easily or without a lot of time that come not from bullets or swords, but with our tongues. Right? People we care about tend to get the worst end of it. Isn't that perverse? It can cause great injury and devastation. It's a world of iniquity. This is the caution. This is the danger. If you want to be a faithful representative of your Lord and Savior, we have to be mindful of everything. Okay? Even down to how we speak. In our homes, in church, in the car, when our windows are rolled down and somebody's cut us off. Right? Those times when our flesh and our knee-jerk natural man is going to want to lead you down a path of anger and wrath. Those are the times too. If our speech is seasoned with salt and full of grace, if that's our natural pattern, if that's what we're defaulting to day in and day out, then we'll know how to answer any man, regardless of the circumstance, regardless of how bad things are. If that's what we're shooting for, then we can still be a faithful witness to Christ even in that moment. Why don't you go to 1 Peter chapter 3 for just a moment. 1 Peter chapter 3. I'm going to pick up in verse 8. I'm going to read down to 15. Finally, be ye all of one mind. 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 8. Finally, be ye all of one mind, having compassion one of another. Love as brethren. Be pitiful. And that doesn't mean sorry and low down, sad. It's like compassion, pitying of others, right? Allowing yourself to feel for others. Compassioned, pitiful. Be courteous. It's friendly in mind and disposition. Not rendering evil for evil. When you're a kid and somebody's done you wrong, what do you always explain to mom and daddy when you get them back? But he started it. But he said it. But she hit me. Right, we've all done that. We do that as adults too, to justify when we do the wrong thing. But what's the standard for us? Not rendering evil for evil. So if we receive evil, let your speech still be full of grace, seasoned with salt, that you may know how you ought to answer every man, even in that moment. Or railing for railing. Railing at, evil could be any form of harm. Railing, that's when they're verbally laying into you and not giving it back. Right? Knowing that ye are thereunto called. You're called not to return evil. You're called not to return railing. Be of one mind and compassion, loving his brethren, being pitiful and being courteous. Knowing that ye are thereunto called, that you should inherit a blessing. You're called to inherit a blessing. What's that blessing? To be with the Lord in glory. All right? No matter what happens here, no matter the worst possible scenario you can think of, that inheritance is not taken away. And it's better than anything here. This is the perspective that you have to keep in mind in order to apply this on any given day. That the inheritance that is prepared for you, that's been prepared from the foundation of the world, is there and reserved for you. That's still true. And because of that, I've been called to serve the one who's made me fit to be there with him. And by my words in this moment, I can choose to glorify the one who bought me and paid for me. Okay? For he that will love life and see good days, let him refrain his tongue from evil, that his lips, that they speak no guile. Let him eschew evil, flee from it, and do good. Let him seek peace and ensue it, to pursue after peace. There's a practical benefit here for now. Loving life and seeing good days. You refrain your lips from evil. You don't speak guile. You don't have deceptive practices. You're seeking after peace and doing good. Guess what? There's a practical reality. It's that things tend to be easier for you. Right? The lying, deceptive one who's causing harm and strife and division, trouble seems to follow them. Right? That's kind of the natural course. The life expectancy of a bank robber and drug dealer is shorter than the average individual who tries to obey the law. That's just reality. Right? For the eyes of the Lord are over the righteous, and his ears are open unto their prayers. But the face of the Lord is against them that do evil. And who is he that will harm you if you be followers of that which is good? Again, so that's that practical reality, that if you're doing the best you can to do good, the natural course is that you won't have as many enemies. Now, will the world still hate you? Yeah, sure. Hates your master. Well, what if you suffer because you've been doing good? Well, that's okay. But and if you suffer for righteousness' sake, you're a follower of Christ and you're doing good, and you're still suffering for that reason, happy are ye. Be not afraid of their terror, neither be troubled. But sanctify the Lord God in your hearts, and be ready always to give an answer to every man that asketh you a reason of the hope that is in you, with meekness and fear. So even in that worst case scenario where you're being persecuted because you're doing good, because you are a follower of Christ, so that's okay. That's when we still need to be ready to answer. When someone asks, what is the reason that you have that hope of that inheritance, that hope of the Lord? Be ready to answer. Not with, arrogancy and braggadociousness, but with meekness and fear. Yeah, too big of a word, sorry. A braggart. Having a good conscience, that whereas they speak evil of you as evildoers, they may be ashamed that falsely accuse you accuse your good conversation in Christ. For it is better, if the will of God be so, that ye suffer for well-doing than for evil-doing. Why? For Christ also hath once suffered for sins, the just for the unjust, that he might bring us to God, being put to death in the flesh, but quickened by the Spirit. That was his pattern. He did everything perfectly, and he still suffered. He didn't render railing against him. He didn't render vengeance. He was calm and quiet and meek. Right? We have a pattern. He's called us to be peacemakers. Right? Is this a high standard? Very much so. But is this the standard? Yes, absolutely. Brother Jonathan, that's not much fun to listen to. Nope. But you need to hear it. And I need to hear it. We have an opportunity to start to train our mouths, to use those as one more tool that God's given us to glorify Him with. Talking about those servants who are given talents, occupy till I come, and one guy took his one and traded and had 10 by the time the Lord came back, right? He was a very profitable servant. He used what the Lord had given him and multiplied therewith, right? If you've been given the gift of speech, you have the opportunity to use that to glorify your Lord and Master. If you've been given one more day to wake up, today's the day to do it. So as you go through today and this week, I want us to be thinking about our words, and are they full of grace? Are they seasoned? Are they prepared in advance so that they can be received as sweet words to the ear, right? So there can be learning going on in those that we're around, because we're trying to build them up, encourage them in the things of the Lord. You know what? When you're doing that, you'll be encouraged too. Because you'll be thinking more on the things of the Lord and what great things He's done for you. And so it has a snowball effect. This is good. This is profitable. This is worth our time and attention and self-discipline. Right? There's a layer of this that sometimes we just want it to be, Lord, let me have this. And we answer the prayer, and then it doesn't immediately happen. We kind of move on to the next thing. So maybe the prayer is, Lord, help me to grow in this today. Maybe I'm not going to be a redwood tomorrow in my speech, but maybe I'm a little bit taller. Maybe my words are a little better, a little less biting, a little more encouraging. Thank y'all for your time and attention. You might have a song you'd like to sing in closing? Five. That's a good one. Oh, for 1,000 tongues to sing. I've got one tongue to sing, so we'll use that one today. Number 5. Oh, for 1,000 tongues to sing my great Redeemer's praise, the glories of my God, King, the triumphs of His grace. My gracious Master and my God, assist me to proclaim, to spread through all the earth abroad the honors of Thy name. Jesus, the name that calms our tears and bids our sorrows cease. This music in the sinner's ears gives life and health and peace. He breaks the power of canceled sin. He sets up
prisoners free. His blood can make the foulest clean. His blood